beautiful people, to another episode of Behind the Glass Sports. All three of the amigos are here this evening. I'm here with Hardy Graham and Will Miller, fresh member of Adult Society. And there's basketball. There's been basketball for a minute, but, in the Tuscaloosa lens, it's always critically important to talk about football first. I'm sorry, Boggs, that's just kind of the way that it is. And oftentimes on this program, in the non-conference portion of basketball season, that means we run out of time because we like to ramble about stuff that's completely aimless. But Kalen DeBoer and the boys are not doing anything on the field, so we're not really concerned about that at the moment. Conference play has started, and the Tide is 2-0 in what is seemingly the most dominant Power 4, 5, 6, whatever you want to call it, conference in potentially the history of NCAA Division I basketball. So, that just is what it is. Boys, am I wrong?
No,
no,
not in the slightest.
Absolutely not. Just looking at this team, not just this Alabama team, but the entire conference, top to bottom. They expanded the league, so it's now 16 teams. There's a real possibility that 13 possibly could get into this, this upcoming field. Where exactly the cutoff is, it's bound to be at least 12, possibly as low as 11, tying the record set by the Big East for most teams from a conference to make the NCAA tournament. I do think it's going to be closer to that 13 number just because of how good this entire league has been in the non-conference. They're going to be afforded quad 1, quad 2 opportunities every single night. No game is going to be bad, even if you drop one, win the next one. Some of the teams that end up 500 in the SEC you're going to look at them. It's going to be like, shoot, they had 6 quad 1 wins. How can we not?
And their schedule is like a 5 in the net.
Yeah, how could we not put them in the NCAA tournament? A couple of teams, just kind of looking at it, that I think could miss out. South Carolina, they made the NCAA tournament last year. That team isn't quite as good. It's definitely at the bottom of the SEC right now. And then, some combination of LSU, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Texas. Pick any 2 out of those 4 to not make the tournament. Arkansas missing would be the funniest story of them all. But I think Calipari is going to get them there at some point. But
I thought they'd win that game last night, Hardy. I really did. I thought for sure that was a game for them to win. Ole Miss will probably make the tournament, I think. They were right there last year and didn't end up being in there, as I recall. But I think that's a better team than last year, and they'll probably make the tournament. But all the same, winning on the road in the SEC is a real challenge, as big of a challenge as has ever been amassed in regular season Division I basketball, really by my rudimentary evaluation. So with that, Alabama with the slight 20-piece on the road last night against South Carolina. The Nick Pringle revenge has been postponed with intent to cancel, gentlemen, as it were. So big performance, though, certainly a lot better than the last time at Colonial Life Arena, though that can probably be excused due to extraneous circumstances. So
we don't talk about those.
Yeah. What do you guys think about Alabama being, like Aiden said, 2-0 SEC play, but the game last night, even though they shot free throws, not effectively, to say the least, but aside from that, a good clean sweep performance.
Yeah, and it was nice to just kind of see the love really get distributed very well. Obviously Mark Sears leading the pack as you expect him to do in almost any game that he's out on the floor. It's just the kind of player that he is. But for the most part, you saw everybody get meaningful minutes that you want to see get meaningful minutes. Nobody was sitting there putting up 2-3 minutes in that game that's supposed to be a contributor on this team. And, everybody making shots, playing good defense, getting aggressive when they're supposed to. So I thought it was, while it certainly felt like they didn't necessarily stand on the throttle per se, you win by 20 on the road in this conference, and you just kind of never look at any point in the game like you aren't just enforcing your will on your opponent. in this conference this season, no matter who you do that against, that is meaningful. And it was also really nice to see them do that following an absolutely massive victory over a very good Oklahoma basketball team. Well, right now we think they're very good. We'll see as they start to play better teams, but seemingly Porter Moser's a good coach. At minimum, that's a well-coached group of high-level players.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Both of these past two games have kind of played out the exact same way, and it's just kind of worked out that way where they get out to a big lead and then kind of coast through the second half. I wouldn't say the intensity was there down the stretch. Nate Oates came out on the court, called a timeout and chewed the ever-living mess out of Darian Reed because he deserved it.
And he didn't get back on defense.
Yeah, I mean, he was sitting there pointing, doing that. Nate Oates clearly was not putting up with it because he knows, in his heart of hearts, that South Carolina is the worst team in the SEC this season. And so when guys are going out there and they're just going through the motions and they can beat a lot of teams, not just, they can beat a couple of teams in the SEC doing that. But when you get into the thick of this SEC schedule, I mean, you got Texas A&M. You got to go into their building on Saturday.
Alabama's not going to win that game, and anyone that thinks Alabama's going to win that game on this podcast right now, we appreciate, first off, your viewership. But second off, unfortunately, that's not a result that's going to go, I think, in Alabama's favor because it doesn't really historically. Anyway, if you look back through many years, many different team dispositions, I remember being there at Coleman Coliseum January 2019, which is crazy to think that it was basically 6 years ago that the two teams played each other. Billy Kennedy had one
basically, it's literally.
Say again, Aiden?
It's not basically. That math checks out.
Yeah. And so, but Billy Kennedy had 1 foot out the door. A&M was sub 500 by then. They would finish sub 500 overall. And they hit a buzzer beater that ended up keeping Alabama out of the NCAA tournament, won by a point. Ridiculous. And then they end up winning by 6 in Reed Arena later on that same season. So if you look at that, I'm not saying Alabama was the cream of the crop of college basketball back then. They were as strongly mediocre as the strongly implies at that time, but they also beat the Brandon Miller team at Reed Arena. And I mean, so point being, this is just a matchup and you don't know what it is. It's like, I don't know. What's a good comparison? Sometimes people just have each other's number. And
Urban Meyer and Nick
has
Saban,
Alabama's digits
Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban, clearly Nick Saban's the better coach between those 2-3 guys right there. But,
I think Gus Malzahn is the better pick there.
That's
a lot of people aren't going to like hearing that, but it is what it is.
Yeah, but I mean that is more than fair. Really just looking at this A&M team, if
Wade Taylor doesn't play, which we don't know.
See, that's what I was about to get to. If Wade Taylor, who is shooting a career low from the field this season at 38%, if he plays, I wholeheartedly imagine he will probably put up his best game of the season. Shoot 52%, knock down 5 threes, something, score 32 points, go crazy, just because that's what teams tend to do against Alabama. That's what Wade Taylor tends to do against Alabama. Buzz Williams' teams crash the glass, especially on the offensive end, really, really hard. It's definitely given some of Nate Oates' team's troubles in the past. But this Alabama team still hasn't caught that next, they're beating teams by 20 points, but it's the second worst 3-point shooting team that Nate Oates has had. And, the defense here and there has still not been great, not as bad as it was last year, but definitely not what it was 2 years ago. And then 4 years ago when they went to the Sweet 16 with Herb Jones and John Petty and all those guys. There are still steps to be taken. One of those, I think, up for debate is, should Darian Reed be starting over Jaron Stevenson? I know Stevenson won hard hat last night, all that good stuff, put in some big time effort plays. But I mean, if you're trying to, go out there, get back to the Final Four, possibly win a national championship, is there a world and y'all see that happening?
Well, taking Stevenson out of the starting lineup, as we've seen in the past with Nate Oates' teams, isn't necessarily an indictment of how he's played. You saw for a time JQ coming in off the bench is, I think he won Sixth Man of the Year. If I'm not mistaken, Matt, some would argue that maybe he was the biggest contributor on the team that year, just from a role playing standpoint. Rylan Griffin, very effective coming off the bench before he transferred to Kansas. So I don't think Nate
What
Oates
a
is
genius
necessarily
strategy last night by Arizona State. 13 points in an entire half. What a great strategy.
Hey,
I,
we're,
you know what?
we're
You want it to be a
really
defensive
rough
slug
night.
match. The other team just didn't cooperate.
Well, it was a rough night for both of the Hurley brothers, quite frankly. So we were glad to see that. The Arizona State loss a little bit tougher, but Dan Hurley, that tough loss against Villanova. Love to see that. Love to see Chris Parker out there getting a couple of minutes, doing his thing out there at Villanova.
So, I don't necessarily think that taking him out of the starting lineup is an indictment of him, but I think Nate Oates has time to figure that out. There's still a lot of basketball left to be played, and I think Nate Oates at minimum is going to go up against some of the teams that he feels are, not necessarily just quad one games, because a lot of the SEC is going to be, but the upper echelon talent of the SEC, see what the results are, and make decisions based on that, based on how this current lineup performs against teams that he thinks he would see in the later rounds of the NCAA tournament.
It's all about what can you do to get your team to that point where they're prepared for those types of games and that part of the calendar. And, any coach that says otherwise is a liar, especially now that it's January and it's conference play. And, the SEC is a whole beast right now, and that's a whole nother dimension. But you're really all about preparing your team for how are they going to be the best version of themselves when it comes to Selection Sunday and really each ensuing game. You want your round of 32 game, if possible, to be better than your round of 64 game, and so on and so forth. Sometimes you're going to run into a team and you're going to shoot 80% from three-point range and still be losing at halftime, and then that just is what it is. But, I think that in terms of that's Nate Oates' thinking, Aiden. You brought that up, and I think it's good that you did that, because that's going to be Nate Oates' thinking is, does this move make our team better for March? And if the answer is yes, then at this point in the year, you do it. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Yeah, and it's something that if you do make a move, it's got to be done quickly, and it has to work, because with this schedule that Alabama's coming up, 3 ranked games in the next 3 matchups, if you start tinkering around with a bunch of stuff and it doesn't work, you can really rattle off a couple of losses very quickly, especially with how good this conference is. If he tries to do something really drastic, right there at the very end of the schedule, possibly after that first game against Auburn, if he decides he wants to make a switch then, bold move, considering the last 5 games of the conference schedule are against ranked opponents, including the trip to Tennessee and to Auburn. There's right now 4 games against top 10 opponents if the AP poll holds firm. Mississippi State right there on the outside of it. This schedule is daunting. Definitely not doing Alabama any favors whatsoever. And to this point, they've played well. Mark Sears still isn't shooting the percentages he was last year, and he's getting back into that form. I think we can all agree that we've seen that over the past couple of games. So if he can get back to the guy that went absolutely insane during SEC play last year and crazy in the tournament and all that stuff, this team is poised to make another deep run. But if he's not shooting that well, then we're relying on a lot of freshmen and some other players that need to step up and knock down some big shots.
Yeah, and perhaps I'm being naive here, but I think no matter what point in the season you try to make, maybe not just that roster or lineup adjustment, but any of these, anywhere on this schedule, you're going to get to test that adjustment against a quality team. Maybe if you make it after the first Mississippi State game or after the Kentucky game, not so much. But as long as you get to test it before you're going into the SEC tournament and before you're going into March, and you're able to get some quality results or get some, maybe not quality results, but solid data points, I think that's really what's going to be important for this team, no matter what he has to do. Because again, injuries could pop back up as well. We could be dealing with that issue. We've already, lost a major component. Hasn't made too much of a difference for the team, fortunately, but those things can come up down the road.
Yeah. Just a little point I want to bring up here. Houston Millette, really not, they burned his red shirt. He's really not getting a lot of run. Definitely hate it for him. I imagined he was going to be a pretty big contributor on the team next year, being one of the oldest players on the team next year. Especially after this season where you look down the roster and you're like, my God, senior, fifth year, senior, fifth year. And like the team next year is going to look drastically different. Even some of the freshmen that have really showed out so far to this point.
LeBaron Philon will be in the NBA.
Mobtown's finest. He will be in the NBA. I mean, if Darian Reed does get moved to a starting lineup, in the near future, he could start putting up numbers and doing some things to find himself playing in the NBA next season. I mean, he was a former 5-star guy, number 10 overall in his class. Coming into the season, there was probably some expectation that he would leave and go to the NBA after his freshman year. He's yet to really show that level of capability, but just because you've gotten that 5-star rating, you might be able to carry that to the next level. I mean, JD Davidson decided he was going to leave after his freshman year. Ended up getting selected in the second round, is on the Celtics G League team, kind of bouncing back and forth a little bit on a 2-way deal right now. But, that's a route that someone like Darian Reed could choose to do. Transfer portal is always going to, impact things. So this roster and its current construction is definitely a fully bought in. We're going to try to go win this thing this season. And the team that Nate Oates has built, I think they're more than capable of doing it.
I think that's a ripple effect example of just injuries in this day and age of college sports. With Reitzel going down, and Houston Millette wouldn't even be playing if that didn't happen. And it obviously sucks for Reitzel anyway that happened. Millette does a lot of things well that aren't reflected in the stat sheet. He defends hard, and it being first and foremost. And, at the guard position in today's game, that's a premium attribute. So I think that he's got that going for him. He's averaging like 3-something points a game right now. Still a small sample size so far. He's only been playing a month, and you got to think about the Christmas break and everything. So that's, a couple of games theoretically that he would have played if they happened, in the sense that sometimes you're not playing twice a week. So he's only played 5 or 6 games, 6 or 7 games so far. Then you have this illness that he's dealing with. So, I mean, I really just think that honestly, the plane hasn't really gotten off the tarmac yet for him. I still see a lot of upside, and maybe he can pick that up. I mean, he's probably not going to start, but I mean, who knows? Maybe he gets hot one day and things change. But I still like this player and what he brings to this team and what he's brought so far. It's still early, I think, and but next year's team takes a hit with him not on it. It's no secret, and I think that's the larger implication here.
Yeah, but we can worry about next year's team after this year's team is done playing a little bit more. In the meantime, this does look like a team that's poised to go on another deep run, potentially break that record for the deepest run in school history, potentially go to the final game and, maybe hang the big one. They're showing every sign of that. And to me, I think that's why I'm looking forward to this Texas A&M game so much, is I almost view this as a litmus test to see if this team can withstand that sort of very physical rugby-ish style of play that you get from a Buzz Williams team, that you get from Tennessee, that seems to give Alabama fits consistently. That's the question I have about this team going forward. We saw one of the greatest offensive teams we'd ever seen the year that Brandon Miller and Noah Clowney were here, and then we saw what happened when they ran into San Diego State. So for me, I'm greatly looking forward to seeing what this team can do against a physical team like Texas A&M. And potentially that right there might be an opportunity for Houston Millett to showcase some of those things that you're talking about that don't show up in the stat sheet.
If you're in a position, though, where you're assessing these kind of games, I mean, you know what A&M is. I mean, I think, John Rothstein tweeted that out last night about, how good he thinks they are. Like everybody knows, has been known for a month how good Texas A&M is. But my thought about this game is whatever team wins doesn't decrease the other stock too bad unless the winner, Florida's the loser. As we saw happen to Tennessee this past week, or really just a couple of days ago. But these are teams right up at the top of this gauntlet, and I still think some of these teams are becoming apparent, like Mississippi State. You're just now realizing what a force these teams can be when they're playing at their best. Some people would put Texas A&M in that boat, maybe Ole Miss when you consider the experience they built and the coaching acumen that's available for that team. A lot of different variables, but I think, and I say this from the vantage point of somebody that has zero belief that Alabama is going to win the game. So that kind of impacts things. But, and I also think with respect to health, Aiden, you mentioned the Brandon Miller team when he had his groin injury bothering him or whatever was going on with his leg at that time. There was something. You're not going to be healthy fully in March, but you'd like to be healthier than this Alabama team has been up to this point. Losing, one of the best shooters in the country to a torn Achilles is just pretty hard luck. With his replacement having bouts of illness going on, Grant Nelson still recovering from that hand injury to start the year. He still wears that thing on him. I think that in that sense, you feel like you've been dealt some things that are just kind of, you throw your hands up at in a very real way so far for this Alabama team. And a lot of that has the potential to resolve by March, but it's just a rough stretch right now.
Yeah, with that point, being able to push through some of this injury stuff, some of the little ticky-tacky things, you do have the veterans on this team, like I pointed out a little bit earlier, that, have played and been in a plethora of big-time games, big-time moments. And so, they know what to do, how to prepare for, this, that, the other, how to manage their bodies, do all of this other things. And the thing that this Alabama team has in spades right now, I mean, we're essentially playing 11 guys deep. Nate Oates full platoon swapped the other night, or I guess last night, and Houston Millett was still on the bench. I mean, we have guys that we can sub in and definitely take some of the pressure off. And I think that's going to play to our advantage, especially in how tough this SEC schedule is. Turning the A&M game, I don't imagine we shoot very well in this game. I think they're, aside from a Houston team that we played earlier in the season, that we ended up fighting tooth and nail with, I think it's going to be very similar to that. Going to tell you that very physical brand of defense. They're going to slow things down, limit possessions, not allow us to get in transition. And if the Tide wants a chance to win this game, they're going to have to figure out how to score without the three-point shot. Teams are going to try to limit them all conference play, all through March. That's going to be the thing. Run them off the three-point line. Some teams have been successful in doing so. Some teams get a little too close and they get blown by, and you make an extra pass, this, that, the other, and they're able to knock down some shots because teams are closing out a little too hard. But some of the teams that have very good mental toughness on the defensive end can definitely cause this Alabama team some problems. Like I said, if Wade Taylor plays, don't really like the Tide's chances too much. If he doesn't play, I think the Tide has a very, very real shot to go in there and get a win, and that would be a huge boost to the resume very early on in the conference play.
So just to be clear, I'm the only one feeling like Roll Tide Willie here, where I'm just like, now we're going to go in there and kick their ass. Now I'm the only one that's feeling that way.
I am not as
confident up here.
they've beaten the hell out of the past two teams they played. And, I think sometimes you need something to kind of knock you down a peg. They could still, like I said, they could still win the game. But I fully expect it to be a dogfight, start to finish. This team's going to have to show up defensively, really crash the offensive glass. Cliff Amore, Grant Nelson, they're going to have to put in big boy work if they're going to try to win this game and hope some of the shots fall.
O boards are one of the things that I noticed Florida giving Tennessee such a tough time with. And that's Todd Golden basketball for you.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. If you're familiar with him from San Francisco, as I am, his whole strategy is let's spread the ball out way beyond the arc and on the wing to our guards. Let them shoot, whether it's a smart shot or the dumbest shot that you've seen on your television that week. And then if they make it, great. And he had a guy in Jamari Bouye that could make a lot of them. And he has guys at Florida that can do that this year as well. Some really good players. But if they don't, let's have a guy inside that's really energetic and strong that crashes the boards and bails them out. And that's how Todd Golden's teams play basketball. And, I would say normally that's such a Bush League, rec league, you or I or somebody else would do that over at the Student Center, when we're playing with a bunch of guys we've never met in our life at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday night. But it works for those guys. It really works for those guys at so many levels. And that's what I noticed them giving Tennessee a problem with. Is that in the process Alabama team could do? I honestly think so. And they can do it last year.
Yeah, you can call it Bush League, call it Parks and Rec ball, whatever you want. They just beat the number one team in the country by 30 points.
By 30 points.
Yeah. Absolutely blew them out of the water. One thing, Tennessee is kind of the opposite of this Alabama team. Extremely good on the defensive end. The offense, at times can, leave some to be desired. Alabama's, as I mentioned, the opposite kind of way. If they can get out to an early lead, I'll feel better. But, saw Auburn walk in and almost lose in Austin. That game came down to the wire.
In fairness, that was because Texas just decided to try in the last 5 minutes of the game, whereas they had not for the preceding 35 minutes.
Well,
except
Alabama, a lot of these games, has let off the gas, let other teams score, and they've gotten lucky that other teams are like, well, we're down 20. We don't need to, the game's already over. We can just sit here and trade baskets back and forth. I mean, that's what the second half of the Oklahoma game was. Both teams scored over 50 in the half. Just going out there and just running, pretty much just doing suicides.
It's funny because Oklahoma actually played significantly better in the second half of that game, and nobody talks about it, whether that's Alabama's fault or not.
I mean, Alabama, Oklahoma damn near doubled what they scored in the first half in the second half.
I'm going to attribute that to they've got a damn good coach. Knows how to go in there and make the adjustments they need to make at halftime. Porter Moser, I don't think gets near enough credit from the national media of how good he is.
Yeah, but I mean, Nato has addressed it. He's, some of the defensive effort, especially down the stretch in some of these games, has been lacking. They've walked into a North Dakota earlier this season where they thought they were just going to get an easy win and ended up getting in a dogfight. You're going to, in this conference, every single game, you have to walk in, be ready to play your best. And even if you don't play your best, show enough effort to possibly get the job done. And with that, I'm going to have to bid you gentlemen a goodbye. I will be attending the South Alabama-Arkansas State game. I'll say hi to Brian Hodges for you.
Arkansas State probably will win that game.
God, I hope not. That would be really, really depressing, but they probably will. So
go show some ladies that snazzy sweater, Hardy.
Yes, that he said. And on that merry note, more basketball.
More basketball. What do you got for me? Because I'm getting a little. Not that I'm unenthusiastic about it, but I'm getting a little tapped on what the 2 under 2 have allowed me to watch so far this season.
Well, that's a unique problem to you. Maybe one day for me, but we'll see. 7 p.m.
Don't do it. 2 under 3, 2 under 4. That sounds manageable. Don't do the 2 under 2 thing. That was a mistake. Don't do it.
The Alabama women's team playing at Texas. 7
They've
p.m.
been really good this year.
It's a big game. Alabama 15-1, 2-0 in SEC play. First 2-0 start in SEC play since 2003, when yours truly was literally an infant at that time. And I assume your pancreas was still working back then.
Yes, it was. I got 2 more years of run out of it after that.
So, that's a high water mark right there. But point being, folks, not to crap on Aiden in any way whatsoever, or myself, but it's been a long time since this team has been this good and played at this high of a level and really just had this complete of a roster. This past March, they played at Texas for the NCAA tournament in the round of 32, and they didn't win. They lost by 10, but it was an okay game considering Texas was the 1 seed, and they're the number 5 ranked team in the country right now. Alabama's 18, but should be a really good game. And this is one of those potential games that you circle if you're this Alabama team as what can really transform a program if you're able to win it. And it's really hard to win in this sport, but those type of games.
I think at minimum you have to go into it saying, like, okay, this is a barometer here. All right, this is the number 5 team in the country. You do have a ranked win so far on the season, but I think if the AP poll were to hold true today, you'd only have 4 ranked teams on your whole schedule, including this game and the game against Michigan State. But I think even if you lose this game, if you look competitive and you look like, hey, we do a couple of things differently here and it wasn't an effort or skill issue, maybe a couple of schematic adjustments, and we could have won this basketball game, I think that's massive, just as massive for this team almost as getting the win. You know, here in DC, we've been talking about moral victories for, since 1999, and it was nice to not have to talk about them this year. But there is such thing as a moral victory in sports, and there's such thing as a good loss. And so I don't think it's just about going out here and potentially getting the, program-changing win over a top 5 team when you're off to your best start since 2003. I think just as important as going out there and potentially, okay, we lose, but we take a damn good loss,
Well, there are good losses and there are bad losses. And basketball, I think, is one of those sports where you can have it either on any given night. And that's what's unique about it. But, in terms of playing these types of games, there are also bad losses. Like 2 years ago when Alabama played LSU and got beat by 38 points on home floor. And it wasn't even Angel Reese that did most of the damage. That's a bad loss. I mean, there's certainly ways to go out there and perform that are, not representative of what you want to do, whether you win or lose. I think this team has progressed beyond that, done a really good job with a lot of things this year. And, in terms of that next step, I mean, this is Christy Curry's 12th season. So, there's a certain level of managing expectations that you talk about a program where the regime's been installed for a decade plus, and what is the ceiling of this program. But the ceiling of this team is a ceiling where I think they can go and win these kind of games or be, like you said, Aiden, be competitive. They were competitive in, this past March in the NCAA tournament. Their roster wasn't as good as it is now. So, or as experienced as it is now. So, I mean, it's a better version of Alabama that's coming in to this matchup. And it is possible that if they're significantly better enough from a 10-point loss that they looked good in, yeah, they can win this game potentially.
Yeah. And the thing that would be really nice is to, get the buzz of excitement around the women's team on campus. I mean, you and I have both been there for many years at various points. And, we both know that, look, let's be honest, the women's team takes the butt end of a lot of jokes. And, and it's not really a sexism thing, in my opinion. It's been because of a lack of performance in big games. It's been because of a lack of looking competitive against the good teams in the conference. It's been a lack of showing anything for, having had such stability in the program for such a long time now. And so it would be really, really nice, in my opinion, for the ladies to, get the win here and potentially get people excited enough that, like, you start to feel the buzz, like, oh crap, can they 2 tips from now, can they go beat South Carolina? Can they go beat Dawn Staley? It would be really just such a victory for that program to have people even on, not even outside of campus, but students on campus talking like that's a possibility. Just having that, fervor and excitement about the women's team. Women's basketball at the collegiate level is in a renaissance right now, unlike we've seen probably ever. If I don't remember something from 1978, sue me. My dad hadn't even graduated high school yet. So like I wouldn't know, but this is a time in sport, in the NIL era, as all these big shifts and changes are happening in these high profile forms of collegiate athletics, that it would be really, really something for Alabama women's basketball to be talked about like a worth a damn product right now. And this is an opportunity to do that.
I think this team does deserve it in terms of how they've played, what they've put on the floor, the level of talent that they have. There's nothing about this team to say you shouldn't go watch them. If you're in the Tuscaloosa area, you have the ability to do it. This is a program that's, like I've said earlier, is built up to this point. And, now they have the ability to do some things that haven't happened, in a very long time. I mean, a lot of people may not know this, but have the Alabama women beat the men to the Final Four by 30 years. And, that piece of information has been somewhat overshadowed by not only the resurgence of the men's program, but also the years in which the women's team didn't have as much success, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and now they've built back up to a point where they're one of the best teams in the country, and certainly one of the best teams, if not the best team in program history right now. This is worth coming out and supporting. And, they've shown it through the performance. Christy Curry's teams have always taken pride in community outreach. I think it means something to this program to have that support, and there's no better time.
I'm with that. I think there's going to be a lot of people that still want to see the win against a team with a really small number next to their name. We know how the student body is. We know how the campus is, but I don't disagree with you. You're 15-1. You're ranked in the AP poll. You beat Michigan State. No, you're and the way they've shellacked lesser competition with consistency this season. They have not played down to the level of competition for the most part, from what I've observed. I think that is something that, you're right. People should give it more credit. But you and I both know it's, in today's microwave society.
Thank you, Avery Johnson.
A small number, Hey, look, he's not wrong. Look, he should have been having the kids run more wind sprints. All right. You got that little nugget on Hey Coach today, or this week, but he's not wrong about that.
Yeah. I'm one of those people that, this microwave era thing is overblown to me. No pun intended. I feel like certain programs, and Alabama's one of them at this point, that, you have a down year, not that they are in either, basketball program. You have the resources that you can reallocate things or change things up without a complete tear down. And that's important. But, rant aside, I also think in a separate soapbox, that's also why it's so important for these major athletic, administrations to invest in these programs so that they have the ability to be flexible and compete and rearrange and, not have to blow stuff up, because there's certainly no reason why, take Alabama, for example, there's absolutely no reason why Alabama should be, one of the worst basketball programs in the country. Again, not that they are, but, not or ever were, but,
But you shouldn't have to tear it down to the studs and get to that point in order to reascend it. No, I see what you're saying. Yeah, and so, especially, I think that's especially the case with the women's team. Like, it would be foolish to do anything like that at this moment. We've heard, I've been part of the noise in our little, leftovers from Tide 100.9 group chats, like, what the hell are we doing with Christy Curry, man? It's just mediocrity in and out, and out, and I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Greg Byrne doesn't listen to me, and that's a good thing, because here she is building the team up potentially to a height that we haven't seen in our lifetime. Certainly to this point in the season, it looks like that. And women's basketball, whether people want to acknowledge it or not, with the TV deals and with the popularity of the tournament and, everything that Paige Beckers and, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and everybody, Leah Boston and all these girls have done to popularize the sport in the modern era, there's revenue to be had here. There is, if you can take this team on a decent tournament run, make it to the Sweet 16. Just make it to the Sweet 16. Be one of those teams that's getting talked about on ESPN ad nauseum for a couple of weeks during the women's coverage. Then there is real money to be made for this sport, and suddenly the program has staying power at this position.
And to that end, I would call on the administration to have promotion and marketing beyond what has been done so far as this team continues the ascent. I don't think we'll have that problem if they win the game tonight. Don't know if they will. It's possible. But, you could – so, I mean, look, I was front and center.
Reese Pfeiffer's going to be on it if they win tonight.
Oh, yeah. I was front and center to the Alabama soccer team's meteoric rise 2 years ago and change. I watched that happen from the standpoint.
That was your beat.
Yes. And I saw that happen, and I saw what the attention that brought. And what that sort of run can bring. And, maybe it's just nostalgia from my end. I wouldn't mind seeing that again.
I don't think it is because it's fun for the whole community. It's sort of like when Nate Oates first showed up, let's be honest. The people coming to basketball games for a pretty long time in the non-conference portion of the schedule during the Avery Johnson era was pretty much who Luke Ratliff brought with him. Okay? That was about it. There weren't a lot of other people out there in the student section with him. And so when Nate Oates came in, suddenly it's fun again. And obviously this program has had staying power and it's stayed fun. And now it's, in my opinion, the most exciting sport on the campus with, the retirement of Nick Saban and quite frankly, the coming back to at least the atmosphere of earth that the program has seen in the last handful of years. But when you get any program, not just soccer, not just women's basketball, I mean, for God's sake, Will, they could start a bocce ball team at the Division I level. And if they had a meteoric rise to where it was the best team, if it was the best bocce ball team in the country, people would get stoked and enjoy it. It's just kind of the culture on campus. And it's fun no matter who it is to see a team that hasn't traditionally had staying power at the upper echelons of their sport suddenly come up and say, no, we're going to take what we believe is ours. People enjoy that universally. It's always fun.
Thank you, Lois Griffin. And if you get that reference, I applaud you. But I agree with everything that you said. But like I said, I think this team has the tools to do just that. And you can see that begin to manifest here in a couple of short hours. Be funny if it did. And
I think 45 minutes.
Yeah, well, when the game's over, if Alabama wins.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
All right.
Yeah, I'm not that bad at math. Look, everybody knows me. Knows I've had at this point pretty long travels in the sports journalism world for someone my age and all sorts of different things, and I appreciate the opportunities, and it's been a blast. But and a big part of that is I couldn't do math at any kind of appreciable level, but I'm not that.
You got this time zone thing down. I keep getting tricked up by the time zones, man. Back on my native East Coast, and I keep seeing, half of my devices when I log into things, they still think I live in Tuscaloosa. They show me things in Central Time. I add an hour, and you people look at me and say, "What the hell, Aiden?" And I'm just like, "Ooh."
Yeah, Central Time Zone gang on top, but I digress. So
college lacrosse schedules are starting to come out.
Denver Broncos made the playoffs, and we can talk about that because Pat Surtain is probably going to win the Defensive Player of the Year award. It has been such a bad run of Denver Broncos football that, you never would have expected it when it started, just because the Chiefs weren't yet. Oh, nice. The Chiefs weren't yet.
Ness, baby.
That's incredible. The Chiefs weren't yet what they are now. And the Broncos were one of the preeminent teams in the history of the AFC, which they still are. But, the Chiefs, anyway, the Chiefs aside, we're sick of the Chiefs. Denver's back in the playoffs for the first time since the 2015 season when we won Super Bowl 50. We had one of the worst rosters in the NFL. Our rookie quarterback drastically overachieved, and we made it happen. We have the ability to potentially win a playoff game in Buffalo this weekend. Don't know if that'll happen. I do care, but I won't be heartbroken if they don't, because this team has already done so much more than anybody ever thought, especially with taking on the most dead cap in NFL history after releasing Russell the failed experiment Wilson, and now he's failing in Pittsburgh, and Steelers fans are ready to start a riot because of how bad he is. Welcome to the experience, Pittsburgh. But a great moment for our team, our new ownership group, our idiotic general manager who wouldn't know how to generally manage if he took a class on it. I don't know. He's just bad.
I don't know if that's entirely fair, because let's be honest, Will, when's the last time there was good coaching in Denver? That's
year.
The thing I have to ask.
This year.
Exactly. So, when you similar to the position, not similar to the position.
Kubiak wasn't even that remarkable for us.
No, he had Peyton Manning on the field.
Best defense in the history of the league. That'll accomplish a lot just by virtue of being there. John Fox
and you sent your offensive coordinator out to take snaps.
Peyton Manning, he covered for John Fox for a couple of years. John Fox, I like John Fox, but when he went to Chicago, he kind of showed what he is. And then we had Josh.
Let's not discredit his time in Carolina.
We had, Josh McDaniels before that. Yeah, with Julius Peppers and Jake Delhomme and Muhsin Muhammad. What's your point?
A field goal away from Tom Brady only having 6 rings.
But, only 6 rings. Oh, man, what a goat he was. But, and I like I say, I like John Fox. But, Josh McDaniels before that. It's been some struggle.
I think the thing here is, though, is it's hard to indict the general manager and the people in the front office that have been putting the roster together when
I can't indict him when every free agent signing he makes fails. Okay,
but he builds a roster, and then it has not been coached with any amount of competency for a decade. You see what I'm saying?
I'll give it to him. He can draft like a mother. I cannot believe the success they've had in the draft, especially when you consider the lack of capital that they've had over the last number of years and how badly they drafted under the previous general, under John Elway before George Patton. I look at their terrible draft picks back in those days, and I look at how they've drafted now.
It's night and day. Vinny Serrato made Bruce Allen look competent. Okay, this is my experience from my childhood. It's for Washington fans for years we couldn't say, oh, is it the coach? Is it the GM? No, you had 2 GMs. You had the Pats and Vinny Serrato, and then you had the slightly more masculine and willing to occasionally say, no, we're going to do this instead, Patsy and Bruce Allen, and a slew of coaches underneath of them. You knew it was the general manager. You brought in Mike Shanahan. You brought in Jay Gruden, who maybe out in front of his skis a little bit as a head coach, but definitely a great offensive mind. You had Joe Gibbs managed to make them look competent a little bit, but it was the GM because he had that consistent data point. I'm just not sure that you can necessarily blame the GM because the coaching has been so bad. And so maybe, Sean Payton, if he's willing to work with the sort of players that your general manager is bringing in, maybe the banana's not as mushy as you might think.
Perhaps, but on the other hand, he's attempted to sign Randy Gregory, and he gave Russell Wilson $242 million as his 2 marquee free agent Russ wasn't a free agent / major big contracts before the Surtain extension in the last couple of years. So,
and then he had the balls to cut his ass.
It had to happen.
Had the balls to cut him. It did have to happen. You're absolutely right. It had to happen.
But I get why you wouldn't do it. You see Cleveland not doing it.
But how's that working out for him?
It's working out like crap.
How much of a setback do you think he had?
Jimmy Haslam's literally about to be made to sell the team. People are literally going to force Jimmy Haslam to sell that team.
It is a law. It is a law in the city of Cleveland that before you move a professional sports team out of the city of Cleveland, you have to give the city of Cleveland the opportunity to buy the team. Now they're trying to challenge that at some level of court, the
I
constitutionality.
wonder who
of
could
that
have
law.
caused that, Art Modell.
Hey, it's no Mayflower truck situation, but at least look, Baltimore likes to run their mouth about stuff. Cleveland actually gets it done.
Man, that
It happened in
truck.
Cleveland. They
That's
made a
so
law.
you could never do that today. You could never just we're gonna put all 100 sets of pads in the back of a truck and drive overnight to the next place, and then they're just gonna wake up and we're gonna be gone.
There'd be some TikTok blogger that sits in the bushes outside the team facility all night that you had no idea about.
Because they got a
They'd
tip
be on
from
Instagram
sources.
Live. Right. Sources. It's cover for their just batshit, and their mom doesn't check on them at 2 a.m. when she gets up to go to the bathroom.
Been there.
It's a 15-year-old that just goes and camps out in Ashburn.
It's a
every
guy
night
with
on
the
Instagram
Twitter
Live.
handle of some third-string player's burner.
Right. Certified Benjamin St. Juice Tater 252525.
Max Charnowski's burner. He played a whole 2 minutes in the last home game.
Good for him. And he did that big sit-down interview with one of those small-time podcasters, somebody that is probably bigger time than we are sitting here on this program, but, we're all, similar fish in the same net. But he did a rather in-depth sit-down talking about his time as a walk-on the team. And I watched some bits and pieces of it. I think that's something that if you want to get real juiced up about the culture of the program that Nate Oates has going, I think that's a good watch.
I think there's a lot to be said for guys like that, right? I mean, but that's a whole separate topic. You can appreciate what they bring from the bench standpoint because, the playing time maybe isn't up there with what you'd want, but if you're the player himself, but, still practicing, getting opportunities to play. I think in a lot of cases, though, when it comes to a roster, I think it can be fun when people gravitate towards those kinds of names, and that can provide some enjoyment. It's pretty funny to see. It doesn't happen as much in the NFL. It's more of a ruthless business in the NFL. I get that. But, if I'm a Broncos fan, I don't know, and I pick a guy that, was only on our team for a little while, 10 years ago, and I make a burner account, it might be funny. Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, it might be funny. But rant over. I see we're almost at an hour. That's about what I got.
Now. Well, college lacrosse schedules are out. I'd like to say shame on you to the University of Maryland for having 12 games on their schedule. That's not the sport of lacrosse. You're the University of Maryland. Play 15, 20 games. What are you doing? Pansies. There's some good games to be had this season. You're going to get regular season matchups between Hopkins and Syracuse. You're going to get obviously Syracuse and UNC. They're in the same conference. You're going to get UMD and Hopkins in the regular season. So, and Hopkins and North Carolina as well. Really a lot of blue blood matchups that we have not seen in the regular season as much lately. I wonder if maybe some of that is ESPN's maybe trying to direct a little more attention to college lacrosse. And let's not pretend that the TV networks don't have some amount of influence over scheduling at any level of college athletics. But I wonder if ESPN's trying to maybe get a little more attention on college lacrosse because of the investment they've made in the PLL product over the last handful of years, being the exclusive broadcasting partner of the Premier Lacrosse League. Speaking of which, there is something that I think that you would be interested in diving into. It really something rather fascinating going on. The PLL is a single ownership model. Paul Rabel and his brother, along with their investors, which I'm pretty sure ESPN is a major one, are the sole proprietors of the league, essentially. They own all 8 of the teams, or 9 or 7 or whatever, off the top of my head. They are the general managers. They make all of the roster and coaching decisions. That being said, you and I both know this. That doesn't mean that it isn't a catastrophically negative effect on your product and brand in the eyes of the public if you come in and just start waving the magic wand, doing whatever you want to, basically set the board for the next season. people lose faith in the parity, in the trueness of the competition. One of the things that's happened in this offseason that's been a bit of a PR nightmare for the PLL is they attempted to remove one of the assistant coaches from the Carolina Chaos. Carolina Chaos has won a PLL championship. They've been to the semifinals 2 or 3 times. And Andy Towers is one of the most beloved coaches in the Premier Lacrosse League because he's the only guy in pro lacrosse that's anywhere near as fiery as a worked up Nate Oates, Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, even Kalen DeBoer to a degree on the sideline. And he makes Mike Vrabel look tiny. All right. So just an absolute character, beloved by the community and the fan base. Towers and his staff's response to Vrabel's interference in the coaching staff was to resign en masse. They just stepped away. They said, that's it. We're done. Bit of a PR bungle. PLL waits damn near a week and a half to make a statement on the matter. Let's all the theories and reporting that was actually of quality we learned from that statement just float around out there as speculation. Doesn't make any kind of, hey, this is what's going on. We appreciate Andy and all of his time and everything. On a personal note, I don't know anybody in the world with a bigger ego than Paul Vrabel. And in said statement, there was language to try to make it seem like Andy Towers got unreasonable about something, and Paul was trying to be the even keel, level-headed guy and save face. I don't buy a word of it for a minute. But it's just something I wanted to bring up before we get out of here. It's not something we see at the NFL level or the MLB or the NBA or in college sports so overtly. The owner of a league or the coming in and directly making those decisions for the team. So I don't know. I just think it's something that deserves to be talked about more, and it's really only being talked about in lacrosse circles because lacrosse isn't as popular a sport as even hockey is in America.
That is very interesting. I've not heard of such a thing. You couldn't do that in like baseball, for example. We got all the drama with John Fisher and the athletic relocation and everything of that nature. John Fisher, you're terrible. Sell the team. But do what Dan Snyder did.
It'd be one thing if John Fisher said, I'm gonna fire this assistant coach. It'd be one thing for John Fisher to say, I don't like this assistant coach for what sounds like personal / political reasons, and I'm gonna remove him, and you got to replace him. It'd be one thing, but it'd be a whole other thing for Rob.
Don't give him ideas. Don't give either of them ideas.
It's not, you see the PR night, maybe you don't, but you should go check it out. Inside Lacrosse has done some excellent reporting on the situation, and it is worth reading about if you want to see a classic example of how in the infancy of what so far has been a successful start of a professional league for sport, you can kill public support and kill the momentum of growth that you have. Because look, the next season hasn't started. The championship series is in February. That's kind of our off-season tournament. We don't know what effect this is going to have. But let me tell you something. Lacrosse players don't really like Paul Vrabel to begin with.
I can't imagine why.
Nobody likes DeMatha. Nobody. Just like nobody likes Caleb Williams, all right? Or Gonzaga, for that matter. DeMatha's crosstown rival that he played at. So,
I thought you meant the Gonzaga Bulldogs.
I think
for a
that's...
second.
No. The Gonzaga College High School Eagles.
The Gonzaga College High School.
Yeah, Gonzaga College High School.
I don't like it either now.
Yeah, well, they've got a turf field right in the middle of K Street in Washington, D.C., and they decided that, your standard batting cage netting was enough to keep lacrosse balls from breaking office windows. Ask me how that's worked out.
That doesn't sound like it's working out.
So, all right. That's what I got tonight.
I'm good to go.
All right. Beautiful people, thank you for joining.